Welcome to Ask Mr. Franchise, our every other week news segment on the franchise industry and what's happening in the franchise world. Our guests today are none other than Teresa Partridge and Tony Abramson. Both bring a wealth of experience. Teresa's with a company that's definitely cut your hair at least once in your lifetime, and Tony is with one of Canada's top marketing and public relations firms, and we'll share some interesting insights on today's show. We always like to do a quick industry update, always covering off about franchisees, franchisors, landlords, and banking. So on the franchisee side of things, we have seen after the last franchise show, which was this past weekend in Toronto, or the weekend just before this in Toronto, we did see a decline in number of attendees, but an increase in quality of attendees at that show. The number of attendees was definitely down from last year. However, the quality of people were up. Kind of interesting given the opposite scenario that happened in the initial show of the season, which took place in September on behalf of national events, where we saw an immense volume of attendees, but not necessarily as good quality. Canadian Franchise Association is hosting another show in Vancouver in about 3 weeks' time, which should be interesting, taking place at the Sheridan Wall Centre. For those viewers that we have that are in BC. And this coming weekend, we're also in Calgary for the franchise show. And then next weekend, it's Ottawa. So my wife is not going to remember what I look like in about 3.5 weeks. But we'll deal with that then. I'll be sending a lot of Skype messages from the road, that's for sure. And I will be speaking at all of those events. On the franchisee side of things, we are seeing still a massive increased amount of franchisee applications come in. More people than ever, unfortunately, getting downsized or laid off or given golden parachutes that are looking to invest in themselves, aren't able necessarily to find themselves positions in the workforce or necessarily positions at the level that they were hoping to achieve. So we are seeing a huge amount of increase of franchisee applicants. I'm sure our first guest, Teresa Partridge, will have some insight on that too, on how she's seeing the trend happening recently as well. On the franchisor side, we do have a very interesting announcement today. A lot of franchisees ask us on a regular basis, what happens if a franchisor ever goes bankrupt? And unfortunately, during the recent economic crisis that some of us think we're still in, there have been some franchisors that have gone bankrupt. And one of them actually is Mega Wraps. And Mega Wraps went bankrupt through its head office. And the master franchisees for Mega Wraps in Ontario and one master franchisee in the Maritimes bought the rights through the bankruptcy courts to be able to manage the brand again, and have actually named Mr. Franchise to restructure and rebrand the entire company. So we'll be taking that on as a major national mandate over the next year. What's interesting, though, is for franchisees out there that do invest in franchisors and wonder what's going to happen if those doors get closed is, it's just like any other company. Eventually somebody will come along and purchase that company, purchase those assets, and the assets are the franchise agreements, and hopefully they're a good investor, and the judge usually has to approve them, and they're there to look out for the best interest of the franchisor and franchisee to help grow a strong company. So for those of you that are concerned about getting involved with the franchise system and wondering what happens if the company disappears at the head office level, it usually resurfaces at some point in time, and hopefully stronger and better than ever, as it will be in this case with Mega Wraps. On the landlord side of things, we are seeing a lot more landlords now starting to be a little bit more lenient when it comes to corporate covenant versus personal covenant. That's been a new revelation that we've seen in the last 2 weeks. More landlords, more top-flight national landlords are ready to accept franchisee covenants with satisfactory applications from franchisees, meaning that the franchisee's lease is in the franchisee's name and it's not in the head office's name. This can be a huge benefit to a franchisee that wants to feel truly in control of their business, and can be a big benefit to franchisors as it really keeps them at arm's length from any danger should anything happen with the franchisee. On the banking side of things, nothing really changes that quickly in banking. It's still Bank of Montreal, RBC, and TD that are aggressively Bank of Montreal, RBC, and Scotia that are aggressively financing franchise deals. TD and CIBC are still waiting on the sidelines. We are still seeing plenty of banking and financing being approved. We've financed in the last month another 4 franchise agreements, so we know that we've got no issues there with any of the concepts that we represent. So we will be back shortly with Teresa Partridge from Regis Corp, and also after that we'll be joined by Tony Abramson from the Adlib Group. Thank you for joining us on Ask Mr. Franchise, and we'll be back shortly.